Madam President-elect, distinguished guests, honourable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to join you in this important conference to say a few words about the threats from the Iranian regime. And I want to say before I start what a great privilege it is to be here before you all and such other distinguished guests as we discuss the issues that affect Iran at the moment. I am my party's spokesperson in the Irish Senate and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Finance Committee in the Irish Parliament. And I strongly agree that the Western democracies should consider the use of sanctions and other punitive measures as tools to increase pressure on the Iranian regime's leaders and officials. More importantly, however, is that we in the West should be careful to not put ourselves in a position where our pursuit of our economic interests help dangerous regimes. This is especially important when we talk about Iran. In light of the sanctions relief that were rewarded to Tehran in return for restrictions on its nuclear programme. In my view, it was a mistake to decouple the human rights concerns and Tehran's support for terrorism from the nuclear negotiations. The world powers should have demanded concrete, verifiable improvement in these areas similar to the nuclear restrictions before they agreed to ease the sanctions on Iran. In a sense, the sanctions relief legitimised trade with Tehran without addressing the full range of unacceptable behaviour from the regime. When the West missed that opportunity, the IRGC and institutions under the Supreme Leader's control became the main beneficiaries of that sanctions relief. This was confirmed by Reuters news agency recently, following its extensive review of business accords reached since world powers agreed in 2015 to lift sanctions on Iran. At least 4 of the 90 deals with government entities involve firms in which the Revolutionary Guards have large or controlling stakes, according to their review. European companies and governments cannot avoid the reality that today the gatekeepers to Iran's economy are those who suppress the Iranian people and export the very terrorism and fundamentalist ideology that threatens all of us. This also means that the EU cannot afford to ignore the fact that behind the official banks and companies lies a web of institutions controlled by the theocracy, and specifically the IRGC. And if that was not concerning enough, we must remember that the first victim of this reality is the Iranian private sector and the average Iranian worker who are struggling to make ends meet and are doomed to live in poverty, despite Iran not being a poor country. As we heard, so many of its citizens are living below the poverty line. As we heard from distinguished speakers today, this is while the country's resources are being used to increase the IRGC's ability to crush domestic dissent and opposition against the regime. Europe should not measure the return of its economic investments in financial terms alone, but also it must consider the humanitarian aspect. What I mean by that is that the EU, and every UN member state for that matter, must make its trade and economic deal contingent upon concrete and verifiable human rights improvements. This means that the EU should make it clear to the Iranian regime officials and regime representatives that if you want our trade, then you must allow the UN Special Rapporteur to visit Iran. You must end public hangings and executions of juveniles. So I will assure you that I will support your cause of a free and democratic Iran and will work with you to achieve this noble goal. I look forward to visiting Iran when it is free of this regime. Its activities are like the sting of a dying wasp, attacking as it knows the end is near. The sooner the regime is removed, the better. Thank you very much.